Okay, folks, last session of the day, so we'll have extra time to rest and relax before the party tonight. But next up, we will be talking about central bank issue digital currencies on the XRP ledger. In March, Ripple announced its CBDC private ledger, which is a private version of the public open source blockchain XRPL for central banks to experiment with and create their own CBDCs. My colleague David Fueling, who is a senior manager for software engineering at Ripple, will be up next. David will showcase how the recently announced pilot for the Royal Monetary Authority of Bhutan will enhance digital and cross-border payments and expand financial inclusion efforts globally. David, bring us home.
Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to be here today at Apex to talk about CBDCs. I'm David. Thank you, Amy, for that intro. Raise your hand for me if you've heard of a CBDC. I'm curious. Ooh, pretty good representation in the crowd here today. Well, for anyone that didn't raise their hand, or anyone watching at home, let's start with what is a CBDC. So I like a nice simple definition. So CBDC is an acronym for a Central Bank Digital Currency, and it's pretty simple. It's a digital currency issued by a central bank. But let's do a little bit more of a formal definition. I like this one from the Bank for International Settlements, or the BIS. There's like three components here that I'll focus in on. First is it's a digital payment instrument. So we're going to focus on payments here. Next, it's denominated in the national unit of account. So here in the US, you could imagine a digital dollar. And then this last part is a direct liability of a central bank. And so these three things we're going to sort of wrap around each other to create something new in the form of a CBDC. So what do we mean by that? So if you have a bank account or you interact with digital money in a non-crypto space, digital fiat, but even in even in crypto, most of the financial system is intermediated. So here on this slide, we see the central bank at the bottom. We see commercial banks and financial institutions like PayPal or Venmo here in the US. And then you see us kind of at the top. And there's this layer of intermediation, which is sort of a dual-edged sword, if you will, pros and cons. So if we think about what's unique about a CBDC versus what we have now, we've all dealt with physical cash, so notes, coins, a dollar that you hold in your hand. This other type of money, though, is reserves held by these institutions. So these are the kind of two primary things that central banks issue when we think of central bank money. And CBDC really fits this interesting niche. So first, it's digital. So if you see bullet 1 where it says physical cash, that's where CBDC is different. It's not physical, it's digital. The second is this intermediation. It's not intermediated. It's actually a direct liability of a central bank. So I also have one more graphic that I borrowed from the BIS, which kind of shows this future financial system with CBDCs in the mix. So on the bottom, you kind of see what we know of today as money in a bank account. And there's a bunch of things that banks do that add a lot of value to the financial system. In the top, you've got cash, so pretty obvious, coins, banknotes. And then in the middle, you've got this new thing, CBDC. It's digital and a direct liability of a central bank. So what are the goals? What are central banks looking to do with CBDC? Like I said before, it's aimed at payments. So especially in developed economies, our payment systems are actually pretty good. They usually don't fail. They're safe. There's some fraud, and that's actually a place where CBDCs can add value. But for the most part, they're pretty good. So central banks want to maintain that goodness. But as we all know, if anyone lived through 2008 or any of the decades before 2008 and after, intermediation presents risks. There are always counterparty risks in that system. And so central bankers want to reduce those risks. And then we think CBDCs can help there. This third bullet point is super important and actually something I care a lot about. You'll see on another slide coming up that in 2019, 5% of US households were unbanked, which is kind of astonishing number to me. It's not easy to get a bank account. So being able to get a central bank currency in the digital realm could be really life-changing for millions of people potentially. I saw another stat. I think the number is something like 2 billion people in the world are unbanked. So there's a lot of room for really changing the world if governments would adopt a new form of digital money. And then these last three bullets here at the bottom are also really crucial goals, especially cross-border payments. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So this is a quote from the chairman of the US Federal Reserve, and I call it out because one, I like it. The central bankers aren't trying to get rid of cash. They're not trying to get rid of anything. They're actually trying to introduce something new that adds value. And so I actually think CBDCs will coexist with crypto. They'll coexist with bank accounts. They'll coexist with cash, with stable coins, et cetera. So one isn't necessarily better than the other. They're all filling different niches and needs. And I think you'll see CBDCs will be one more thing in the financial system to really make a better world. So quickly, how is a CBDC different from some of these other options that we either use every day or hope to use every day? So commercial bank accounts are a good starting point, especially here in the US. They're not always on. Holidays, weekends, it can be difficult to use a bank account. You see some of these inclusion stats. It's just plain hard to get a bank account, let alone use it while it's open. Innovation, intermediation, these are all problems with bank accounts, and CBDCs can really make a difference here. This one is interesting to me. So governments around the world are creating real-time payment systems for fiat. And when I first got into CBDCs, I thought, this solves it. Why would you need a CBDC? We've got real-time money. But you see, again, most real-time payment systems are intermediated still. So you still have financial and systemic risks. And most domestic real-time schemes don't handle cross-border payments. So there's a lot of room for being able to hold tokenized CBDC in foreign jurisdictions. Okay, so why not stablecoins? Crypto has solved the problem. Not really. Stablecoins add a lot of value, but they also introduce some pretty considerable, I'll call them risks. And actually, I think daily for the last 2 weeks, if you've been paying attention to the news in the US, there's a lot of people in government that want to eliminate stablecoins on grounds of systemic risk. Whether that happens or not is TBD. I personally think stablecoins can coexist with government money, but we'll see. There's certainly some things to overcome for stablecoins. And then, of course, what about crypto? That's why we're here, right? Crypto should solve this, and it has a place, but it also has problems. It's a trade-off. And so the biggest kind of two that I think are swings in value when you're making payments, and then just unit mismatches. When I go to Amazon, I want to pay in dollars, typically. So why should we all care? Why should we as developers care about CBDC? I think there are external trends that are aligning with these goals. And you see a lot of these trends here. Market trends that are pushing the world to think about and deploy CBDC. And there's actually two that I think are the kind of most interesting. And the first one is China. So China has been researching CBDC for almost a decade. I think their research started in 2014 or so. And so they really have a leg up on the world in terms of creating a government-backed digital currency. And they're going fast. Billions in transactions, geopolitical impacts, and goals for their central bank currency. But I think stay tuned for the 2022 Winter Olympics because, based on what I read in the news, it sounds like they're going to go live at the Olympics with a central bank digital currency that foreigners can hold. It'll be a brave new world, or brand new world. This other sort of column is what the rest of the world is doing in response to kind of what's happening in China. And you see this other market force, which is concretely Facebook's Libra. But I think the idea of Libra is actually what has central banks moving. There may be more Libras. And in fact, we see that with things like USDC or other stable coins, for example. So CBDCs are coming, and I think that's why we as developers should care. And as you'll see in a minute, if we at Ripple and together with you in the community do our jobs right, we can take all of the knowledge and resources that we are learning about XRP and apply those right to the CBDC landscape. So that brings me to Ripple's CBDC solution. And this is the thing that me and my team have been working on for the better part of a year. And I'm really excited to share that with you today. So there's kind of two components. The first is what we call the CBDC ledger. So we've taken the open source XRP ledger software, and we've essentially deployed it in a private network for our central banking partners. This might seem alarming at first, but it's not, and I'll show you why in a minute. It's actually really great for central banks and for the XRP ledger community. Just to go a little deeper on what's the difference between the XRP ledger and a CBDC ledger. At the top, it's pretty much the same software, but because of amendments and an open source code base, central banks can actually vote in new amendments. They can create different functionality in their ledgers, and I'll talk more about that in a second. In the middle row there, we have the topology differences. So you have XRP Ledger as this public decentralized network running XRP Ledger software, RippleD. And on the right, we have essentially something very similar, but in a private deployment. And then at the bottom, pretty different currencies. XRP, of course, is the native counterparty-less digital token of the XRP Ledger, and CBDC is going to represent a fiat currency, and it will be controlled by central banks. So let's talk about sort of those two-sided benefits of why we think this is actually a great development for central banks and for the XRP Ledger community. So first is, why will central banks benefit from not being on the XRP Ledger mainnet? When we first started the project, we thought, gee, let's just use issued currencies and have central banks use the public mainnet directly. It turns out that the first box, the proven security of the ledger, exists in both places, but this yellow kind of middle box is really the key reason. So central banks want to control their national currency. That makes sense. In fact, they have a duty to do that. But we want to be able to allow them to innovate and the XRP Ledger community to innovate independently of each other, because it's natural that between all of the world's countries and our community, interests will be different. And that's a good thing. That will create innovation. And so I'll talk in a minute here about how that can work and how kind of the two systems can communicate. But the great thing for central bank deployments is, because we're using the XRP Ledger software, all of the tooling that we make as a community has dual use. So that's great for bankers, it's great for developers, great for resumes. Hopefully there will be more jobs in the XRP Ledger community than there are today even. But what about the other side? Why is this good for the XRP Ledger? Well, one is risk reduction. So the ledger's been running for a very long time without outages. It's very secure, and that goes to the brand of XRP and the XRP Ledger. So there's a natural, it's natural to want to go a little slow. We want to protect that investment of what we have now. But we do want to be able to innovate. And so we're really taking advantage of recently announced technology called sidechains, which hopefully many of you are familiar about, and federation. So we're hoping that we can innovate in CBDC world, and the XRP Ledger community can innovate in XRP land, and we can share with each other, essentially. So central banks can take good stuff from XRP Ledger, like hooks maybe, and the XRP Ledger community might be able to take some new innovations from central bank deployments. And that goes to the heart of value transfer as well, and utility. The second component we're building is something we call the CBDC manager. So we realized that it's not as simple as just giving people a private blockchain. There's a whole host of problems and things that need to be done in order to manage the life cycle of a digital currency, from minting, distribution, auditing, and then kind of going the other way when people are done with their money and it makes its way back to the central bank, redeeming it and maybe destroying it. So the great thing about all of this technology is it all runs on XRP Ledger at the core, right? So one, we've built multi-sign into the system. If you imagine somebody, one person at a central bank being able to just mint money, there's quite a bit of risks there. One, that person might get sick. Maybe you can't mint money the next day when you need to. There are also other risks, like you don't want one person to be able to mint money in your financial system. So we're using configurable quorums and multi-sign to control every step of the central bank process, from minting to issuance, et cetera. We're building key management systems to support a variety of different deployments. We think every central bank will have a little bit of a different requirement for key management even, among other things. So you might see key deployments that live in some, and maybe on a tangent card, or maybe in the central bank, or maybe some combination of that, or even new technologies that we haven't seen yet. And there's a bunch of other benefits that we're sort of baking right in, and I'll show you an example of the DEX for on-chain liquidity in a minute. Here's a screenshot of the UI portion of our manager. So this product is really aimed at employees of central banks. So these employees are the ones managing currency. And so we have a full UI with workflows to do all of these operations, again, rooted in the XRP Ledger. So I want to shift a little bit just to some examples of how CBDCs can work together in the XRP Ledger community and why this is good for everybody. So you've probably seen in the news recently, El Salvador, they recently made Bitcoin legal tender. El Salvador was actually dollarized in 2001. So if you imagine El Salvador deploying a hypothetical CBDC ledger running on Ripple technology, again, all hypothetical, they would obviously have USD. That's their prime fiat currency. But they would have Bitcoin as well. And wouldn't it be great if you could actually create markets on Ledger for El Salvador's version of Bitcoin and their version of USD? And so we can enable this for any central banking partner. That's great. And we can imagine a hypothetical US central bank running Ripple technology. In this case, they obviously have USD, but USDC is another example of a stablecoin that's quite popular. And we can connect these two through sidechain federation. But it gets better, because with sidechains we can keep going, and we can even connect this into the XRP Ledger mainnet. Now, of course, this would depend on governance structures in any given nationality. But technically, using XRP ledger technology in this way, we can do really amazing things. We can literally create a new financial system based on central bank money. So this is kind of a zoomed out view of that financial system. On the left, you have CBDC ledgers, you have XRP ledger, you maybe have XRPL sidechains running new technologies, maybe like hooks. But we know that not every central bank is going to deploy Ripple technology. So we need to account for that as well. So on the right, you can kind of see, well, there's the Bitcoin network. There might be custom CBDC networks running on a variety of other software. And we can use other technologies. You'll hear more about Interledger today and tomorrow. RippleNet is a core functional, a core piece of software that can bridge the gap between XRP Ledger and other networks. And then there's just third-party exchanges. This is probably the simplest way to move from one network to another. So we really think this is the future of money. And so last but not least, we have a tradition at Ripple of stealing each other's thunder. So thank you for stealing my thunder. But a few days ago, we announced our first partnership, the Royal Monetary Authority of Bhutan. And we're going to pilot CBDC with the RMA, which is really exciting. Bhutan has a very well-developed financial system. They have a lot of modern technologies and systems that they've already deployed. But like I showed on my previous slides, CBDCs fill a niche that existing things just don't handle. And RMA sees this, and we're really excited to be moving forward with them. So with that, I don't have time for questions, but if you have some, type them in the chat, come find me, and really appreciate being here to talk about CBDC.